just kind of explain first? I just want to make sure that I'm getting the wording right. Is your proposal to completely eliminate these SROs or rework them?
So what the schools are asking for, what the students, are asking for is counselors, social emotional support in the schools, and to eliminate in-school SROs. So right now, the SRO officers are stationed in our schools. And so what my proposal is requesting is that we increase social emotional support and learning for our students, which can come in the form of counselors or other types of interventions, but removing school-based SROs. We don't have to have SROs in the school buildings, any armed officer in our school buildings. Our school buildings are environments for learning where students succeed, they thrive, and I want our students to feel safe walking in our schools without always worrying about an officer with the gun walking around.
Okay, so it would eliminate the position essentially on the force.
Now, I didn't say eliminate the position.
Just explain how that would work, I guess.
Well, think about it. Out of all the schools, we have 11, for all our schools, we have approximately 8 SRO officers that cover about 11 schools right now. So we can always have a centralized location for SROs where they can work with the school administrators in creating, and the school community, which includes students and parents and community members, in creating safety, climate, culture teams, but they don't have to be stationed in our schools. They can serve a purpose, but they don't have to be in our school building. Now, let's say there's an incident in our school, a real criminal incident, a criminal or violent incident. Then you can contact an SRO officer, as long as it's not your normal infractions, which may include like a fight or a student perhaps not listening to a teacher.
Okay.
But we can use them in terms of addressing those major issues. And I actually think that when you're working with students, you need someone who's trained to work with students. You wouldn't take any officer to engage or de-escalate a situation, particularly when it comes to youth. Because students have various, they're at a very different developmental stage, and they require various social emotional support and needs. And so you want a skilled person who has been trained to work with youth, who has training in cultural competency, training in dealing with students with disabilities, training in various areas so that they can better engage and, again, work with the school team to create a plan, to create a restorative plan to better serve our students.
Okay, that makes more sense. I wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
And then talk to me about these. I know you spoke a little bit about the stress level in these students. What do you think? Do you think that starts at the high school, or would these social and emotional initiatives start earlier?
There are studies nationally that are seeing indicators of stress at a very young age, starting in elementary school. I think that students have to experience many issues, whether it's in school or at home. Children are facing adverse childhood experiences. And so we need to have resources within our schools, whether it's in elementary schools or middle school or high school. And I think it's important to have it in elementary school because in many cultures and communities, counseling, social emotional support is stigmatized. There are adults who will not seek a counselor for mental health issues or social emotional issues. So if we teach our kids about, one, identifying their own social emotional needs and awareness at a very young age, this becomes something that is embedded in them and they know how to advocate for themselves and seek those types of resources. But I do think across the board that we need to provide students with social and emotional support. And at the elementary school, it could be someone who works with the families, a family culture person who could serve as a liaison between the school and the students and the families. But we do need to invest in social and emotional support in all our schools, not just the high schools. Our adolescents, our middle school kids, they're developing into teenagers. They need a lot of support. Our high school kids are not only dealing with the stress of schools and other responsibilities at home, but they're also preparing to go to college or into the workforce. It's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of stress. So across the board, we need to provide students with social and emotional support.
Okay, so really it's taking, I just want to make sure I'm understanding it right. So it's kind of pulling the resource officers out of the school so they're not
Correct.
present in the everyday because of what it does for these students, and like maybe having less of them in order to better fund the social emotional, or where's the funding coming from?
That is a discussion that we have to have. Recently, I don't know if you saw, our state invested about $1 million in increasing SROs in our schools. Every time there's an incident, we increase SROs, but we never pay attention to the root of the problem. One of my colleagues spoke about William Parson, who passed away, which was tragic. For a parent, I remember his mother at the funeral. And I remember reading what he wrote and just being there after he was shot and killed. I also remember reading about the young man who pulled the trigger. That young man, they said that in his home, in his room, they found weapons. He was stressed. He thought that people were out to jump him, and he may have experienced some sort of trauma where he got into a fight with someone or someone attacked him. But he had social emotional needs. He may have had some mental needs. But we lost 2 young men under the age of 16 on that day. We lost the young man that was killed and the young man that pulled the trigger. What could we have done, or what proactive approaches could we have taken to ensure that that young man got the support that they need? I get it. You know what? Some people say that he didn't have a strong family structure. But when you're living in a district where over 90% of the students are students of color, where most of the students are economically disadvantaged, where parents are not working your traditional 9 to 5, they're working overnight. They're working multiple jobs. I grew up with 2 parents in my household, and my parents worked more than 1 job. So I'm the oldest of 5. By the time I was in middle school, I was cooking full meals for my siblings. In 7th grade, I had a social emotional breakdown, and I had nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. So we need to take more proactive approaches, because if someone, and also that young man who pulled the trigger, they said that he moved from one school to the next. If we had invested, or if someone identified his needs and we had a plan for him where he was getting the counseling he needed, there was some sort of restorative practice approach, perhaps we could have prevented that from happening. And also, that happened right on the corner of PCTA and Classical and Central, right there on the corner. There was an SRO at the schools. Did that stop the incident from occurring? And it happened outside of the walls of our schools. So what that shows me is that these issues are not, these issues are happening outside of the school building. And so what our students need is support, social emotional support, social emotional interventions, restorative practice interventions. But we constantly respond with, we're constantly reactive in the way we respond to incidents and not proactive. It's time that we take a different approach and be a bit more proactive and address the root problem and not just address the issue because it happened and now we want to increase safety, but the reality is that that incident happened out of the school building.
Did this initiative come out of conversations with student groups?
Absolutely. About a year ago, our students were here advocating for counselors and no cops in the schools. And so I met with the students. I've been meeting with them actually on multiple occasions, Councilwoman Carmen and I, and we've been doing research. The students have been doing their own research, and they've been advocating for this. The students are aware of this need.
Right.
They're advocating. They're saying, this is what we need in our schools. We need support. We need counseling. We need social emotional support, because we have a lot of things that are happening not only in the schools but outside of the schools, and we need help. So again, let's invest in the need rather than be reactive without any data saying that we need SROs in the schools.